Okay.
Good evening and welcome to the November 1st Thursdays at the Marin County Law Library. Um, I'd like to take a moment to thank everyone tonight for coming and to give a shout out to our law librarian, Stephen Richards, and his staff for the dedication in providing the services here at the law library. Both daily operations and programs like this one, and that would include lawyers in the law library, occur because of the dedication of Stephen and his staff. So Stephen Richards, his staff Ray, Marcia, and Steve make these events happen, and we are grateful and want to call attention to their efforts. Tonight, we are going to have the good fortune to have someone speaking to us about something that's very timely. November is, in fact, National Family Caregivers Month, and it's estimated that more than 690,000 people in California are living with Alzheimer's disease. It's also estimated that there are more than 1.34 million unpaid caregivers in California. Whether any of us provide daily care, participate in decision-making, or simply care about someone with the disease, help and support are available. I would like to thank and welcome Jean Girimonte tonight, who comes to us as someone who has both experienced this and continues to work in a community and give back at a time when we can only call this kind of work inspirational on a daily basis. I'm told that Gene met the love of his life, Art Curtis, over 35 years ago. Together, during their lives together, they dealt with the loss of family, civil rights issues, and eventually with Alzheimer's disease. With the support of the Alzheimer's Association and other local organizations, Gene was able to care for Art until Art passed in 2018. Gene is now a volunteer community educator and a member of the chapter board of directors for the Alzheimer's Association. Please join me and First Thursdays at the Law Library in welcoming him tonight. And remember that the purpose of these kind of events are to make available information to all of our members of the community who may or may not be able to attend this event at the time. We do have a YouTube station where this is now going to be posted probably within a week of this event. It's there for just that purpose, and that is to be a resource. In this case, since this is a month celebrating caregivers, what I would hope by the end of this is that anyone who is seeking information about resources, about any kind of help that they might be able to get, that they'll know exactly where to go. And Jean, we thank you for your time tonight and appreciate you coming.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to share this information with everybody. Again, my name is Gene Girimonte. I'm joining you from my home in Santa Rosa. As was just, was that you, Denise? I came in so late because I had a hard time logging in, but I think
yes,
that was
I am Denise, and it's my pleasure to get to meet you. I have only heard very, very nice things about you from your colleagues, and we're just delighted to have you tonight.
Well, thank you again. And as Denise just said, I was the primary caregiver for my late husband, Art Curtis. We were living in San Rafael at the time. I moved up here to Santa Rosa about a year after he passed away in 2018. He was diagnosed with both vascular dementia and Alzheimer's dementia. This particular program is a little bit less about the disease itself and more about the communication strategies that caregivers and others can use to communicate with people that have the disease. But I learned rather the hard way to ask for help when I thought I could really take care of Art on my own. It became apparent that it just became too difficult. I reached out to the Alzheimer's Association, and we received a lot of help and support from them. I'll review some of those resources at the end of the program, but I just wanted to put that in perspective for you so you know what my background is. After Art passed away, I decided, and after I retired, part of the difficulty in caring for Art was that I was also working a full-time, rather demanding managerial job, and that made the caregiving that much more complicated, having to hire help increasingly over time. But the Alzheimer's Association, I found out about quite by accident. So after Art passed away, I decided that I wanted to contribute whatever I could in the way of my experience and knowledge about caring for someone with a difficult cognitive disease. And that's why I now do what I do, which is to deliver these kinds of programs to the community at large. So I thank you for participating. And I'm also, as Denise said, on the chapter board. We're part of the Northern California, Northern Nevada chapter. And so let's get started here. And I apologize for being late. It's one of those little technical glitches, I guess, that I just couldn't get signed in. At any rate, here's what we're going to talk about today, or this evening. We'll explore how communication takes place when someone is living with any form of dementia. And by the end of the program, you should be able to explain the communication changes that take place throughout the course of the disease, be able to decode the verbal and behavioral messages delivered by someone living with dementia and be able to respond appropriately. And then also identify some strategies how to connect and communicate through each stage of this disease. So what is communication? It is more than just talking and listening. It's also about sending and receiving messages through attitude, tone of voice, facial expressions, and body language. Communication is a way to express who we are and how we relate to each other. As the brain changes with Alzheimer's disease or other dementia-related progression, people lose the ability to speak and decode the language in the usual ways. And the better we understand these changes, the better we can connect with people living with Alzheimer's or other dementias throughout the course of the disease. I just really quickly want to explain the difference between the term dementia and Alzheimer's. Dementia really is the umbrella term for a collection of symptoms that affect thinking, memory, and behavior, that affect the brain in different ways. There are many different diseases that make up what we call dementia, Alzheimer's being the most frequent form of dementia, but there's also Lewy body dementia, vascular dementia, as was the case with my husband. Parkinson's disease is also considered a form of dementia. So the dementia is really just a category of diseases. So let's look at what we're going to talk about here. As Alzheimer's disease and other dementias progress, people lose their ability to communicate their thoughts and feelings through words. They also lose the ability to understand the words that others speak to them. However, they do maintain a sense of self throughout all the stages of the disease. This is really important to remember that. And what this means is that elements of those characteristics that make the person unique will remain a part of him or her throughout the disease. Connecting with the person's self is key to effective communication, staying connected and giving him or her a voice as the disease progresses. Just a simple example of what we mean by the person will maintain that sense of self. My husband, Art, had a great sense of humor. He loved to make people laugh. And that characteristic actually remained throughout the disease until the very end, of course, when communication was almost nil. Now, in the early stage of the disease, there may be just a few noticeable changes in the person's ability to communicate with words, or there may be no recognizable changes at all. Asking the person how he or she would like to be helped with words can be useful in this early stage. Language abilities diminish as the disease progresses, and communication moves from easy conversation to relying on emotions and the five senses to connect. As care partners and caregivers, you are the ones who will adjust the ways you communicate and maintain connections with them throughout the disease. Remember that the essence of the person continues. We want to respect the person as the adult that he or she is and adjust our communication based on what is meaningful to the person today, no matter what the stage. So let's look at some early stage information here. In the early stage, you may or may not see changes in the way the person communicates. For some people, there may be some shifts in their ease with words or conversations. Some of the most common changes you may notice in the early stage, you can see on this slide, and include difficulty finding the right words, taking longer to speak or respond. Withdrawing from conversations is common. They start to get a little bit self-conscious about their lack of abilities. Decision-making, problem-solving, those are affected. And the emotions might come into play a bit more than in the past because that's how they can express themselves. Whether you notice changes in the way the person speaks or not, communication in the early stage is crucial. This is a period in which everyone involved is adjusting to the diagnosis and is having thoughts and feelings about the changes ahead of them. Remember that for some, denial is a part of the disease, while for others, emotions can feel overwhelming. We want to come to terms with the diagnosis and the emotions you're all feeling by talking together and expressing your connection. This will help you both accept the diagnosis, move forward, and discover new ways to live positive, fulfilling lives together. Communicating throughout this process can also bring closeness that will help everyone adjust more easily as the disease progresses. I'm going to show a little video clip here. Our first video clip is with Martha Tierney, who is from our Alzheimer's Association's home office in Chicago. And she's going to tell us about how to be helpful in the early stage.
Communicating in the early stages of dementia with the person with the disease is important. At that time, you still have language as a tool, so you can learn things about what they might prefer as the disease progresses. For example, as the disease progresses, a person might have difficulty finding words. Caregivers often struggle to know what to do in that moment. Early on in the disease, you can ask. You can say, if you ever have trouble coming up with the word, would you rather that I jump in and give you the word, or do you want me to wait and allow you some time so you can find it on your own?
So one of the best ways to be sure you are offering the help with communication that the person needs is to ask them directly. For example, if a person struggles to find the right word, ask whether it feels better when you supply the word or when you wait patiently. I was pretty lucky with Art because he was very open and communicative about his diagnosis. He wanted to handle it in the best way possible. And we actually talked about this, whether or not I would help him if he got stuck. And of course, he said, yes, please. Just, you know me well enough, just jump in. So for me, that was kind of easy. Keep your sentences direct and straightforward to help the person avoid feeling lost in a conversation. Short sentences can make your meaning clear. Avoid long explanations and take your cue from the person, taking care not to talk down to him or her. It may take the person longer to find words or put thoughts together and express them. Be sure to allow extra time for conversations. And I really emphasize this. Allow that extra time when you know you're going to have a conversation. You don't want them to feel pressured or rushed. Keep in mind that conversational needs will change over time. And in the early stage, the person with dementia needs to have his or her voice heard. You can help facilitate this when you meet the person right where he or she is today, regardless of the stage of the disease. And be sure to include the person in any conversation if he or she wishes. especially those that will have an effect on his or her future. Including the person can be empowering and engaging. Still in the early stage here, some other key points include don't make assumptions about a person's ability to communicate because of an Alzheimer's or other dementia diagnosis. The disease affects each person differently. Speak directly to the person if you want to know how he or she is doing. Sometimes you'll go to the doctor with someone with dementia, and the doctor will not ask them the question. They'll ask me or you the question, and that's not appropriate. We want to speak directly to the person. If they can't answer, then we can help. Explore which method of communication is most comfortable for the person. So if you're distant from the person, this might include letters or email or phone calls. But some prefer in-person conversations. And it's okay to laugh. Sometimes humor lightens the mood and makes conversation, or makes communication easier. Be honest and frank about your feelings. You don't want to pull away because your friendship and support are important to the person with dementia. There will be some time for questions at the end, so I'm going to move through these stages for you since we got off to a little bit of a late start, but we'll have plenty of time for questions. So moving to the middle stage. Sometimes this is also called the moderate stage. And I'll just say that these stages are not clearly demarked. There's no clear line when one stage ends and one begins. Each person is different, but we use the sense of stages to give caregivers especially what to expect as time goes on with the progress of the disease. So in the middle stage, many changes in the middle stage of Alzheimer's or other dementias affect communication. If you noticed some of these changes in the early stage, they are likely to become more pronounced in the middle stage. Some of the changes you may notice, you can see on this slide, and I won't read through all of them, but for example, one of them that might become a new sort of a characteristic is they will use different words to describe something because they can't conjure up the right word. For example, I don't wear a wristwatch, but a person might refer to a wristwatch as a hand clock. They can't recall the word wristwatch, so they'll use something that's descriptive. So you might have to ask a few probing questions to find out exactly what it is they're talking about. But that will begin to happen a little more frequently in the middle stage. And also communicating through behavior starts to increase rather than using words, because words are harder and harder to recall. They might also start organizing words in an illogical fashion or reverting to speaking in a native language. Unfortunately, some begin to use a lot of curse words. And this was something that for me began to be a little embarrassing when we were in public, because when Art would get a little frustrated or anxious, a series of cuss words would come out that were just lying in wait, I guess. They might also have difficulty following a TV program or following any other conversation. I always thought that Art would be content to watch some of his favorite programs on TV, but even that became hard for him to follow, so it would not hold his interest. Now, changes in the brain make tracking and decoding words more difficult. For that reason, people begin to use behavior to communicate more often in the middle stage of the disease. Next, we'll discuss the adjustments that you can make that help you continue to connect with the person living with Alzheimer's disease or another dementia. You've heard me use the word connecting with the person, connecting. Oftentimes, that's really all that is what is most important for the person, especially as the disease progresses. Just having that connection, whether or not there's anything really important being communicated, it's just that idea that you're there, you're staying connected. Now, please note that some physical conditions and medications can affect a person's ability to communicate. If changes occur suddenly and dramatically, it's probably a good idea to consult the doctor. There may be a medical issue that needs to be addressed right away, such as a urinary tract infection or a side effect of a medication. In our next video clip, Beverly is going to share advice that she gives to caregivers in her role as a support group facilitator.
I would advise couples, and I usually do advise the caregiver who comes to the group and is caring for a spouse, that you take your time. Always count to 3 before you respond, because it gives you time to think about your answer and what's going on. Generally, in a marital dispute, it's quick, it's back and forth. You're quick to give an answer. When they've been diagnosed, to sit back and say, okay, you're supposed to be the one that's reasonable here. Let's change how we do this, because there's only one thing you can control, and that's you. You cannot control them and their process.
So in the middle stage still, when communicating with a person in the middle stages, you want to approach the person gently. Identify yourself and approach the person from the front and at eye level. Call the person by name and say who you are in relation to the person. For example, "Hi, Dad, it's your son, Gene." This will help orient the person and get his or her attention. Sometimes using touch can show that you care, even when your words are just about a simple task or are not understood. A gentle touch can also help get a person's attention. Don't criticize, correct, or impose your perspective. It will backfire most of the time. Pay attention to your facial expression and tone of voice. Be calm and patient. The person can definitely feel either your tension or your patient understanding. And finally, remember to take the time to communicate. Give yourself and the person you're talking with enough time to respond, interact, and connect. In this next video, Rebecca is going to talk about adjusting her own thoughts and responses when her mother repeated herself.
She could sense my frustration, because occasionally I would lose my patience and I would bark at her. "Why are you asking me that question again? I just answered that question 2 minutes ago." And then she would get frustrated because, she was very old school, and she's like, "Don't disrespect me. And I didn't ask you that question 2 minutes ago. It's a new question." So phase 2 of our relationship was like, okay, that's a new question. I'll answer it again.
When you join the person's reality, you take a little time to see the world as he or she may be seeing it right at that moment. When seen from his or her perspective, the person's behavior can often become understandable to you. Due to the changes to the brain that accompany this disease, the person will probably not be able to see your perspective. So you will be the one who will need to use respect and empathy to see the world through his or her eyes. Joining the person's reality is key in helping the person have his or her say, and it provides soothing and reassurance. And to do this, you can take the steps listed on this slide. You want to listen to figure out what the person wants or needs. This means paying attention to both the words and the behavior of the person. Keep in mind that the person may be saying something about his or her feelings or needs, but may be feeling something else on a deeper level that also needs attention from you. For example, if you hear them say, "I can still drive just fine," that may also contain the feeling that I don't want to give up my independence, so don't take that from me. Or you might hear, stop taking over my life. I hate it. That may actually reflect the meaning, I hate this disease and I don't understand why I can't do what I always could. So you want to let the person know you understand what he or she may be feeling and why, whether they are expressed through words, behavior, or both. Answer any questions or address any issue he or she may bring up. You know, this idea of joining the person's reality is really critical. I didn't know that, and when Art began to ask me if I was keeping in touch with his mom and dad, it threw me because he knew before his disease ever started that his mom and dad had since, had passed away already. But because of his lack of proper memory, because of his dementia, in his reality, they were still alive. I answered that question wrong. I corrected him and reminded him that they were not alive. Well, that was like learning it for the first time. So I had some quick recovery to do there and calm the situation down and change the subject. So I never made that mistake again. And it's sometimes hard to join a person's reality because it feels fake. It feels like you're engaging in a lie sometimes if you answer a question that's not truthful. But you do it in respect of them because that's their reality. As we said just now, they can't join our reality after they get to a certain progression of the disease. It's up to us to be in their reality. And once you accept that and get comfortable with it, it's fine. I learned to be okay with that. I actually learned to sometimes enjoy it. I felt like I was creating a little play of sorts, a fictional play. Okay, I'm going to move ahead a little bit here. So you want to keep it slow and basic. You want to take your time and be patient when you communicate. The more you slow down, the less resistance you will encounter because the person won't feel rushed or unable to keep pace. Rushing leaves the person feeling frustrated, inadequate, upset with him or herself, and then resistant. By taking your time, you will avoid frustration for everyone. Use short sentences, basic words, and speak clearly. Be specific. It sometimes helps to offer the choice you think is best at the end of a sentence. For example, rather than asking, "What would you like for breakfast, Mary?" you could say, "It's breakfast time, Mary. Would you like eggs or oatmeal?" You want to give multiple cues. It's helpful to give the person many different cues as you communicate, and this reinforces your words and clarifies your message. Provide visual cues and gestures, but avoid sudden movement. Use gentle gestures and pointing, but avoid making sudden gestures that may startle the person. Write things down for the person. Reminder notes, calendars, labels, lists can remind the person of where things belong, what is to be done, or who is who in the person's life. Labeling photos can help the person keep track of names and relationships in this middle stage. You want to offer answers in your questions. It is much easier for someone in the middle stage to choose what to eat for lunch, for example, if the question is not open-ended. "What would you like for lunch, Bill?" is a question that may leave the person overwhelmed and stuck for an answer. This often leads to confusion, or easiest of all, refusal. But it's much easier for the person to answer the question if it's phrased like this: "Bill, I'm making sandwiches for lunch. Would you like ham or turkey?" The person can choose one or the other and will often choose the last option mentioned. If he seems stuck, you can suggest an answer, such as, "How about ham?" You want to repeat information or questions. Although you may have many reminders in place, plan on needing to repeat information you provide or questions you ask. The person may not have been able to decode your message completely the first time you said it, and repetition can help. Turn negatives into positives. For example, if you need to get the person into the shower and they always resist the task, rather than saying it's time for your shower, triggering resistance, you can say, let's go get you cleaned up for the day so you'll be ready for Cindy's visit this afternoon. Avoid quizzing the person. Quizzing the person, asking him or her to try harder to remember, or saying that he or she knows the answer and asking the person to think again, it's just unfair and doesn't work. Trying harder just leads to frustration. It is much more respectful and helpful to give the person the information he or she needs, along with reminders as needed. You want to respond empathically and reassure. Let the person know that you are there and listening and that you hear his or her concerns. The facts are less important than the person's feelings and his or her view of reality. These feelings and perspectives are very real to the person, even though they may not match your reality. Responding to those feelings first can help avoid resistance. You want to provide reassurance that you're together, you're safe, and you're there to help. You want to let the person know you hear and understand the thoughts and feelings they're having. And as long as there is not a safety issue, just agree and go with the flow, finding common ground whenever possible. And make any adjustments to the situation that are necessary, and then redirect the person to another activity if needed. That redirection to another activity, I mentioned it a little bit when I talked about Art's mom and dad, having passed away. But if a person gets really stuck on something and frustrated or anxious or frustrated, you want to just redirect them into something more pleasurable. Maybe it's, let's go have a snack, or let's go take a walk, or let's do something that might be something that they would enjoy, rather than staying stuck in that moment. I guess the advantage to the caregiver person, when someone's memory is affected, if you move them out of that space they're in that's frustrating them to another activity, they won't remember that they had an issue 5 minutes earlier. Okay, the late stage of the disease. This is what we call the severe stage. In the late stage, the person may only use a few words, but he or she still needs to connect and communicate. Since the person has lost many functions by the late stage, you may feel a strong urge to do something. Usually, though, your presence and connection with the person are much more important than doing something specific for the person. Remember that the person is an adult with a sense of self that continues throughout the stages. You can connect with those aspects of the self by remembering the person's history and respecting his or her preferences. The goal is to help the person feel content and happy whenever possible. Keep talking, using familiar words, names, phrases, poems, songs, passages, and so forth. Whether you get a direct response from the person or not, the sound of your voice helps maintain the connection between you. And using the 5 senses is a great way to connect with the person living with dementia in the late stage, through touch, sight, sound, smell, and taste. And it can help to try to understand the person's feelings in the late stage. So connecting with these 5 senses is really important. In this next video clip I'll play, Sandra talks about connecting with her mother in the late stage of the disease.
I know that my mom feels aggravated. I know that she feels alone. I know that she feels confused. And I know on any given day, I don't know if I've made it better for her. I try. In these later stages, I've come to recognize that being really aware of the 5 senses is really important. Touch, seems to give her a great deal of comfort. I know when I come over, I'm going to brush her hair all the time. My husband noted to me recently, he said, you know, you should see the look on your mom's face when you're brushing her hair. She's just happy. She's just happy. She doesn't say a lot. And I do it for a long period of time. I comb it, I braid it, I do funny things with it, but it just allows me to just be with her in a way that makes her feel comfortable.
So connecting to the five senses is a great way to connect, and touch is such an important one. You can see some of the ideas on the slide. I'm not going to go through them individually. I think they speak for themselves, but I really identify with what Sandra just said. When Art was no longer able to bathe himself, I would pull him up in a transport wheelchair to the kitchen sink because it was nice and big, and he was tall enough he could sit in his chair and still get his head over the faucet to wash his hair and so forth. But I would give him a sponge bath every day, just about every day when it was possible, and that was one of the happiest times we had together during the middle and late stage of his disease, because he was happy. You could see the smile. He was vivacious. He was uplifted. I think it was the combination of the touch being clean, the smell of the soap. He could look out the window as we were doing it. And it was just a really good time for both of us. Yes, it was a little bit of work for me to do that, but it was that time to really be connected. So I strongly encourage using the sense of touch in whatever way makes sense. Next, there's some ideas here for using sight as a way to connect. And again, looking at pictures, looking at magazines, looking at sometimes webcams that are on the internet, like the Monterey Bay Aquarium or the Eagle's Nest that was up last year, all kinds of things that you can do if you're capable of using the internet with the person to exercise the sense of sight for them. Again, lots of ideas on this slide, and you can come up with your own. Using sound is really important. We do a once a month sing-along up here at the Luther Burbank Center, where people living with Alzheimer's can come with their care partners and for an hour just sing their hearts out. But they don't have to sing, they can just listen to music too. I know I kept some low-level music on for Art in his last stage of the disease because it was soothing for him, and he always enjoyed music in his healthy years. So there are all kinds of things, again, we can do with sound, but I'll let you take those ideas off this slide. I'm rushing a little bit just because of time, but not to the point where you're not getting the information here. Using the sense of smell is really a powerful way to do things too. I would go out to the yard and take leaves off of a lemon tree, rub them in my hand, and I would do the same with maybe a sprig of rosemary or a scented flower or something. Bring those in and let Art. He wouldn't necessarily be able to identify the smell, but when he smelled it, he would light up, and it made him feel good. So those are the kinds of things you can do using the sense of smell to stay. Again, we're staying connected with the person in the late stage where they're really not very communicative at all. Ooh, I'm going backward here. And the sense of taste. Well into the late stage, people living with dementia enjoy tasting favorite foods and flavors. And here are some ways on this slide you might provide some strong flavor sensations for the person. Now, as the ability to swallow diminishes, and that does happen with Alzheimer's disease, choking can become a hazard. So you want to be sure to provide only what the person can swallow safely. And we also don't want to impose too many dietary restrictions in the late stage. If they're getting too much sugar, that's okay, because unfortunately, Alzheimer's is a fatal disease. So it's not like having a little too much sugar or the unhealthier foods is going to make a big difference to them. But, let them enjoy those things as they will. This last slide is just a summary of all the things we've just talked about. If you have access to the handouts, I think Denise, you might have been able to provide those to everybody, but you can revisit this particular slide just as sort of a summary slide of what we've already talked about. I want to show this next video clip of Dr. Sam Fazio of the Alzheimer's Association's home office again. He's going to describe the multiple effects of not caring for yourself if you're a caregiver.
Taking care of yourself while you care for somebody with the disease not only impacts your own health, but it really can impact the person with the disease. So, for example, if you're not getting enough sleep, you might be easily irritated, which will then sort of spill over to your interactions with the person with the disease and maybe being short with them, which then might cause them to get frustrated. So it's not only important to take care of yourself for your own health, but really for you to really be a good caregiver.
I'll tell you, taking care of yourself is easier said than done. And the one advice I always give people is, ask for help sooner than later. I was one of those kind of stubborn people that thought I could do it all by myself. And what all that did was result in a very high level of stress to the point where I needed some counseling to unwind it and figure out how to take care of myself. I'll just give you one hint. I now ride a bike 135 miles a week. That was my way to relieve the stress, was to get out on my bike after not having ridden since my college days. So I didn't start out at 135 miles a week. So before I get to the Q&A, I just want to review a few of the resources of the Alzheimer's Association. We have our helpline, which is just that. This is not a call center where you're going to be put on hold and have to listen to music. This is staffed with master's level degree clinicians who have experience with dementia, Alzheimer's disease, and the aging population. So I strongly encourage anybody to use this helpline anytime, day or night. I sure did when I just needed someone to talk to. But if you want any kind of information or want to talk about your own situation, this is a great way to do it. Oops, too fast there. We have all of our education programs, or at least most of them, online, as well as doing them through Zoom. And we're also, now that the kind of the post-COVID era, we're able to do programs in person again as well. But if you're interested in any of these, you can go to our website, which is alz.org, and look these up. This is a huge help with Community Resource Finder. Again, can't do it all by yourself, and the Alzheimer's Association can act as a sort of a clearinghouse for you to identify other agencies and organizations in your community. And I have to say, Marin County has a wealth of resources compared to other places in the state or in the country. So take advantage of that. In fact, the greater Bay Area, we're lucky that we have a lot of resources, but things like transportation, food delivery, caregiving at home, long-term care, legal and medical sorts of advice, all kinds of resources can be identified for you by the Alzheimer's Association. We have something on our website called ALZ Connected, which is basically like a forum for people to communicate with each other about their experience and what's helpful to them and so forth. I won't go into too much detail there. And then finally, the Alzheimer's Navigator, which is a great way to get help in formulating a plan for you, for your family, or for whoever you're maybe caring for. There are a lot of things we don't necessarily know how to think about when we're facing such a disease. And so the Alzheimer's Association can help put together a plan that you can follow. And with that, I will stop talking and open it up for questions. I thank you.
May I invite viewers tonight to do one thing after this presentation? The Alzheimer's Association is interested in demographics of viewers and asked if people could let us know what their zip code was. Again, we're not trying to track anyone directly. We're just looking at what areas of outreach we reached. So if someone's willing to either email in and just say I was a viewer at and from this zip code, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Denise. I appreciate you reminding them of that. We are a nonprofit, of course, and we rely heavily on grant funding and donations and so forth. And when we apply for grant funding, we use the person's name. Or we don't use the name and zip code, but we keep that information as proof that we actually deliver programs to the communities that we say we do. So it's sort of a documentation process for us, but we really appreciate. All we ask for is name and zip code. If you want to be contacted, you can make that known, but we're not going to contact you just by using a name and a zip code, but it helps us document.
It's not a problem, and please know how much we appreciate you joining us tonight. These resources for the community, especially during COVID, questions came up a lot at our other events, lawyers in the law library, people asking about how to navigate different scenarios. And your coming here tonight is much appreciated.
Thank you. My pleasure.
This will be available for folks to watch, and I'll make an observation. We just had the Ombudsman of Marin County last month, and after the viewing, we've had almost 30 people who've taken the opportunity to look at this. So the whole purpose behind this is to share information, and thank you so much for your generosity tonight. We appreciate you.
You're most welcome. We're here to help.
Yeah. Thank you.
If there are no more questions, may I wish everyone a good night, and we look forward to working with your organization in the future.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.